Let's read that first story from The Hill. Russia threatens military and political consequences if Finland or Sweden tries joining NATO. Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova warned against other countries attempting to join NATO after Russia started a war with Ukraine Thursday. Finland and Sweden should not base their security on damaging the security of other countries, and their accession to NATO can have detrimental consequences and face some military and political consequences, Zakharova said in a viral clip of a press conference. The ministry later posted the same threat on its Twitter. Finland and Sweden have given significant military and humanitarian support to Ukraine since Russia invaded. One pretext Russia has given for attacking Ukraine is that NATO would not give any assurances that Ukraine would not be allowed to join the intergovernmental military alliance. See, I'm gonna pause real quick and say a few things. It's hard to believe any of the stuff that's coming out. You know, I mean, this stuff is on Twitter, these videos and these statements, but a lot of the videos, a lot of the claims, a lot of the propaganda just seems like attempts to manipulate the public. It's hard to know what's true. But we have had stories coming out for quite some time. This is from France 24. The Russians are coming. Sweden on edge as Russia flexes military muscle. It could be a long-standing propaganda campaign. I just don't really think so. I think Russia has literally invaded. Russia has said that they're engaged in a military operation. Call it whatever you want. I think the reality is Vladimir Putin feels like he lost. He lost the influence battle. The U.S. basically bought Ukraine. He couldn't do it. So here we are, getting into war. The question is, this threat towards Sweden and Finland, is it legitimate, or is Putin just spiraling out of control? Nick, I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
I don't see, Putin's never struck me as the sort of guy that like just spirals out of control, right? The sort of guy that gets pissed off and just starts, executing generals and things like that. He's always seemed to be, again, I don't think he's a good guy. I think he's a bad dude. But I've also thought he was a fairly calculating guy. I mean, the guy has managed to stay in power this long within Russia, within an environment where it's fairly unstable from a political perspective with a bunch of oligarchs running around. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that he's at a point where he's just kind of lost his mind. I think he's pushing to see how far he can get away with what he's doing. I think he knows he's got a fairly short time to be able to act in order to consolidate gains. And then it's all a question of what are you bringing, right? When it shows up, when inevitably we get to the negotiating table, what does that look like? And what are you transferring in order to get what you want? So I don't really understand why he brings Sweden and Finland into this. But again, I don't see him as being an unstable guy.
What are your thoughts on, I mean, you were talking about unconventional warfare. That's where you specialized in when you were in the military?
Yeah. So
what are your thoughts on everything we're seeing, right? Just to preface this, none of us here at least thought Putin would go this far with Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so this seems very much like conventional warfare. But it seems like they're saying while Kiev has some major gains, they've taken down a lot of Russia's assets, they're going to lose. Mm-hmm. And then there's questions about what they can do in the insurgency phase, in the resistance phase.
Everyone likes to talk about the fact that Russia is not the power the Soviet Union was. That's absolutely true, right? It's got a GDP that's a little bit bigger than Mexico's, right? It's got a population of about 150 million. So not what the Soviet Union was. But when we talk about Russia doesn't have the GDP to fight a sustained war, you know who also doesn't? Ukraine. So this isn't about them having to fight a war for years. This is about how quickly can they get their gains, consolidate those gains, and then put themselves in a good position on the negotiating table. And so from Ukraine's perspective, they had to know that you're not going to go toe-to-toe, especially with the geography of Ukraine. It's not like you can go fighting in the mountains for 10 years like they did in Afghanistan. Right. It is built for tank warfare, and the Russians know a little something about tank warfare, especially in Ukraine. Right. There's a lot of historical battles there. But what a lot of people don't understand about this is immediately following World War II, the Ukrainians fought like a 10-year insurgency against the Soviets. So there is a history of them fighting over that area. The borders of Ukraine are a little bit weird from an ethnic standpoint. So at this point, this is a question of using the natural geography that you have, right, around the Dnieper and whatnot, in order to slow like the major advance. And then it's largely going to be urban battles. If you can be in an urban environment and you can make them pay, because that's where asymmetric warfare works really well for the defender, for the person that doesn't have the technology. But if you're sitting in a city right now and you've got an AT-4 or an RPG, or if you got really something good like the U.S. gave them, like javelins, okay, you got a $10,000 or a $15,000 rocket that's taken out a $15-20 million tank, right? That adds up. And so if they fight the insurgency point in the urban areas, which are kind of behind the lines of the Russian advance, and then they use their military in order to kind of stop them at some of these main geographical areas, rivers being one of the best, they can drag this out and they can make Russia pay a much higher price for it. And that's what I don't think Russia can afford.